This is Vivek Ramaswamy, currently polling about 6% in the 2024 Republican primary. Basically, nobody likes this dude. He's ridiculous. Anyways, he went down this extreme Bible-thumping pro-Trump nutcase TV show on Kenneth Copeland's TV network for an interview. And they came up with some deeply bizarre justifications for bringing him on in the first place when they're so very obviously pro-Trump to the death. Anyways, let's examine the propaganda methods these people use to promote the people they like in their messaging, despite the fact that they're completely wrong. By the by, this is not part one, but you don't have to see the others to understand what's happening. This stands independently of the rest. I'll provide context if it's missing. And we'll be playing Breath of the Wild 2 in the background here. Okay, let's give it a listen.
This weekend, you were at Charlie Kirk's ActCon. I want to play this quick video about the straw poll results. Watch.
So, the straw poll results, and there's a lot of detail to this, I'll tell you, but I don't think it's a huge surprise.
Okay, if you don't know what a straw poll is, let me show you the little trick. Charlie Kirk is a propagandist. I'll explain the trick he's going to play here. What he's going to do is he's going to put massive weight on this poll as though it's an A-graded pollster, right? As though you can trust it completely and totally, 100%. That's what he's about to do. In reality, as he says, it's a straw poll. Do you know what a straw poll is? A straw poll is a poll taken off the cuff by just the people in the room, and that's it. It's very easily skewed toward, people of a certain demographic or people of a certain whatever. If you have... basically, really what this poll is, this straw poll, what it is simply a poll of how many of Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA's followers like Trump. It's not a measurement of the Republican Party by any stretch of the imagination. TPUSA is the extreme end of the spectrum within the Republican Party. So he's about to give us a poll that shows what the extreme end of the party, at best, thinks about various different candidates. And he's going to pretend it's an A-graded pollster. That's the propagandistic trick he's about to play. All right, now let's listen to him play it. Now step back and listen to him where he starts here.
Let's watch.
So, the straw poll results, and there's a lot of detail to this, I'll tell you, but I don't think it's a huge surprise.
There isn't a lot of detail. It's a straw poll. It means they polled the people in the room. It means it was an off-the-cuff, quick little thing.
But the winner of the straw poll with 85%, Donald J. Trump, is the...
Wow. Who could have suspected such a thing? Donald Trump is more popular among the far right than others? Knock me over with a feather. I am just blown away by that.
Winner of the Turning Point Action straw poll. But the interesting question is who won, if not Trump, who would your next choice be? And the conventional wisdom would be, well, it would be the governor of Florida or Nikki
Ron DeSantis. God, he can't even say his name.
Haley or Mike Pence. In the second place, if not, or who would you choose as your second choice? With 50%, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Wow, okay, Vivek Ramaswamy took it. Yeah, that's because Ramaswamy has not challenged Trump in any way, shape, or form. He has only boosted Trump, talked positively about him. That's it. Because he's really not running to be president. He's running to get a book deal or maybe be vice president. He's running for vice president ultimately, more than likely. So that doesn't surprise me at all. DeSantis is the only one in the primary that's really challenged Trump to any serious degree at all. Now here we see a perfect example of Charlie Kirk and the far right skewing results, skewing polls, skewing information to make it more favorable to their god emperor. Geodis. I'm not using that flippantly. They use that, okay? Anyways, it's actually pretty interesting to see like how they kind of manipulate data to come to conclusions and use it to their advantage. Propaganda is valuable to understand.
That is pretty amazing, isn't it?
You know, it just tells us where the far right is.
And so the two big winners, Donald Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy, at 50% of you said Trump won, Vivek too. That's really interesting.
Wait, what was it? Trump won the what?
50% of you said Trump won, Vivek too. That's.
I don't know what that, the Vic 2? I don't know what he's talking about here. But Trump didn't win anything. He's a fucking loser. Aside from that, again, the 50%, I don't care how many of your extremists believe this nonsense. This is the farthest right. This is the furthest right of the furthest right that you can get. That's who we're talking about right now. Of course they love Trump. He panders to the far right and has been for like a long time now.
It's really interesting.
All right, Rick, let me go to you out of that. What you heard Vivek's talking about, his generation. Of course, now that event was overwhelmingly younger crowd. How important is that? Is the millennials when it comes to presidential election?
Wow, that's actually fascinating. So, it's a straw poll. Obviously, it means absolutely nothing, right? But fascinatingly, they're using this poll like it's an A-graded poll, like it's the consensus. Young people like Trump by 85%. No, it was just a poll of the people in the room. Are you kidding me? Was it even a poll of the people in the room? I'm not sure. They didn't even tell us what their methodology or their polling pool was. They told us nothing. I mean, it's a joke. These people are a joke. I mean, they're not a joke. They're very intentionally propagandizing, and they know exactly how they're doing it, too.
Of course, now that event was overwhelmingly younger crowd. How important is that? Is the millennials when it comes to presidential election? Should they really be playing to that?
Well, it's huge. I'll say two things. Number one, I think he's one of the most important voices in America right now. He articulates our values maybe better than anybody else out there. Kerry Lake's kind of close, but Vivek does it amazing. Secondly, I'll say this, Gene, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, almost every conversation I've had about the presidential race, his name comes up before even DeSantis or anybody else. I get asked about him by almost everybody. They want to know what I think about him. Is he with us? Does he have our values? Is he the real deal?
Dude, this is a joke. This is just a straight up joke. These people cannot be serious with what they're saying right now. I mean, they are so transparently full of it, right? Is it just me? How are they, with a straight face, coming out here and saying this garbage? This is ridiculous.
I had the chance to meet him a couple of times at CNP.
Yeah, so Vivek Ramaswamy is apparently, in their eyes, the next runner-up, and DeSantis is out of fashion, and he sucks, and nobody likes him. Literally nobody. Where are their heads? Seriously, where are these people's heads? Not on their shoulders.
With us? Does he have our values? Is he the real deal? I've had the chance to meet him a couple of times at CNP, blown away by his presentations there. And I'm just so thankful for him. And what you were talking about at the beginning with the religious differences, obvious, but the religious similarities and the passion for freedom of religion and a recognition that there is a God. Remember what we've always said, the difference in the American system is that freedom comes from God and is exercised with a respect for his authority. And
Okay, so this is all propaganda that, if you don't know Rick Green, he started something called Patriot Academy. I think he started it. I don't know. Anyway, he heads it. And it basically rewrites American history to be more Christian nationalist than it actually is. He rewrites it to be the kind of thing where, like, the founding fathers, like, loved Jesus, like, every single one of them, and blah, blah, blah. You know how it is. You know how they do. They're crazy nonsense. So anyways, that's how they rewrite it, and you can hear him rewriting it right here. Like, the founding fathers specifically and intentionally left God out of the Constitution entirely. But if you listen to these people, you'd never know that. Okay, let me explain the kind of the process of this. There's something called the Olive Branch Accord. I think it is an Olive Branch Accord. That name sounds right. It's either an accord or a declaration, or I don't know what it was. It was some kind of something or other. Anyways, Olive Branch is what it was called. And it was sent to King George originally, before the Declaration of Independence, as a desperate attempt to avoid war with England. And it was sent to him before the Declaration of Independence was sent, obviously. It was sent to him months before, I believe. I think it was months. Maybe it was years. I don't know. Anyways, when the American public found it was nice, it was good, and it was basically the Olive Branch Accord, I think is what it was called. Basically blamed King George's generals or his understaff or whatever, his ministry of whatever. I don't remember what they're called. The people that ran his armies and stuff. It blamed them for the issues that Americans had. It wasn't blaming King George at all. It was only speaking highly of him, right? And when the American people found out that not only did King George reject the Olive Branch Accord, he didn't even read it. He sent it to somebody else to read and reject on his behalf. And that pissed the American public off so much that they called it. They were like, now we're writing the Declaration of Independence. You wouldn't listen to us before. I mean, the Declaration was written not by the people of America, but by specific leaders, like founding fathers, right? But there was deep outrage among the American public at the time. They were not happy that George rejected he didn't even read the Olive Branch Accord. That just infuriated them. And that's when the Declaration of Independence was written. Now, in the Declaration, they were explaining their ideal government. What is the ideal government? Previously, it was kind of framed as though your rights were granted to you by the government. By King George's will, you will be allowed to do this and that, and you won't be allowed to be this and that, whatever. The idea in the Declaration of Independence is that our rights as American citizens don't come from government. Government is out of the equation, and they're not in a position to remove these rights from you. So they wrote God-given rights. That's what it said. I couldn't remember for some reason. God-given rights. They said these rights were God-given. The reason they said that was not to point out that we were a Christian nation. They didn't even believe that. It was to point out that our rights came from somebody other than the government, other than King George, other than whatever government we ended up setting up at the time, which was a Continental Congress, I think. It was the group of people that was ruling in America at the time. So anyway, that was the idea behind it. And Rick Green and these other people, they're just completely rewriting history intentionally. They know this is nonsense. They've read enough history probably to know that they're completely full of shit, but they're going to rewrite it anyway.
Difference in the American system is that freedom comes from God and is exercised with respect for his authority. And Vivek.
No, the difference in the American system is it doesn't come from government, not that it comes from God.
Shares that conviction with us. So I think he's a very important voice, and I would love to see him, if not in the White House, certainly in the administration, and a major player for helping us restore America.
And there it is. Do you hear what he said there? You catch that little ditty? He said, if he doesn't win the presidency, which of course he's not going to, then I would love to see him somewhere in the administration. That's what it's about. It's about getting into the administration somewhere along the line. It's about becoming the vice president, or I don't know, the Secretary of Transportation or something, a cabinet member of some sort. That's the goal here. That's what Vivek is doing. And that's why he's not speaking negatively about Trump, too. He doesn't want to say anything negative about Trump because he knows if he does, Trump's going to cut him out completely, and he expects him to win. So that's the whole deal. And Trump is okay with that because he knows the more people are in the field, the more split the field is.
Okay, let me show you this.
And these people know that too. That's why they're interviewing Vivek and speaking so positively about him and all of that other garbage, because they know that he loves Donald Trump maybe as much as they do, and he will do anything to get into the administration.
Vivek from Floyd Brown, founder of the Western Journal. Vivek Ramaswamy is certainly starting to turn heads. He leans into Maga ideas and never attacks real Donald Trump. Others could learn from him. Governor Ron DeSantis, Mike.
I mean, this is obvious, right? Is this not like transparent what he's doing right now? How are any Republicans falling for this? Seriously.
Pence, Chris Christie. Vivek, you are the only person, if my facts are correct, that said publicly if you were elected and Donald Trump was convicted, you would pardon him. Is that correct?
That is correct. To my knowledge, I haven't been tracking what everybody else has been saying. I was the first person to say it because I will be really honest. It would be easier for me if Trump was not in this race. Now,
Sure.
I'm polling at third in the GOP primary. And if Trump weren't in there, I'd probably have a clear path to the nomination.
No, he wouldn't. I mean, this is complete fabrication. Ron DeSantis, if Trump weren't in the race, would have a straight shot to the nomination, almost certainly. Although Trump has been, attacking DeSantis, I thought for sure DeSantis was trying to become Trump's, his vice president. And if that were the case, they may actually have a chance of winning against Biden. In all seriousness, if they did that. But they're attacking each other. They don't like each other, apparently. DeSantis is moving further to the right, which is not what the Republican Party wanted. They wanted people more to the center. There is a gap to be filled right now, and the gap is being filled by extremists. People don't want extremists. They want people who are more moderate and not complete nutcases. That's what the Republican Party, or a lot of it, is looking for. Now, 30 to 40% of the party is far-right extremist nutcases who are willing to vote for Trump or Ramaswamy or whoever is the furthest right. But that other 50 to 60% are not into this, not into all these culture war issues. They're a little bit more moderate, and when DeSantis moves further to the right by doing things like banning books in Florida schools and forcing people to teach children that slavery taught the black community useful skills and that the black community is to blame for every bad thing that happened in any race riots against them and all that other stuff. When he does things like that, he isolates people that are sick of Trump and want somebody that isn't a nutcase. So I think this is a really bad strategy by DeSantis to go further to the right. It's just dumb as dog shit, in my opinion, for him to have done what he did. But here we sit. He did it. I don't know why he chose to do that. The more extreme things you see him doing, the further you can see his poll numbers dropping. And I would get it. I would get that why he was doing what he's doing if he wasn't attacking Trump, too. I would get that he was trying to pick up Trump's voters after the fact if he wasn't attacking Trump.
I will be really honest. It would be easier for me if Trump was not in this race. Now,
Sure.
I'm polling at third in the GOP primary. And if Trump weren't in there, I'd probably have a clear path to the nomination.
He pointed out, I'm polling at third in the GOP primary. What are his poll numbers? Out of curiosity, let me look it up. I feel like the dude has a metal last name, though. Ramaswamy? What a metal fucking last name, right? Vivek? I don't know. I mean, it's an okay name. It's a standard Indian name, right? Like Eshwar or whatever. Just a normal Indian name. But Ramaswamy, that is a badass fucking name, right? My God. I'm just a huge fan of the name Ramaswamy. I feel like you have to be a hard ass with that name. Obviously you don't, because we've got this guy with the last name. But it just seems like the kind of name that would lend itself to hard assery. Apparently not all the time. This graph should give you some insight. Each dot is a different poll. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard this principle, but there's a principle in math, and it kind of goes like this. You're standing around a giant jar of beans at a carnival, and there are like 20 people standing around it with you, right? And if you can guess how many beans there are in this gigantic jar, then they will give you $50,000, or they'll give you the jar of beans. That would be valuable in its own right, wouldn't it? Anyway, so here's the principle in math. You go around and ask each individual person what they think, or how many beans they believe there are in the jar. And you take those numbers that they gave you, that each individual person gave you, and you average them out, and it should give you a rough idea of exactly how many there are. If you average them out, you'll get pretty close. It's a principle in math. I forget what it's called. Something, law of averages, something. Anyways, that's the idea behind what we're looking at here with the polling averages. If we take all of the pollsters and average their results out, we're probably getting really close to accurate. It's shown to be true. I mean, that's proven itself to be pretty true. With the polling averages and all that other stuff that we're looking at here, the polls are usually within 3 to 5% in either direction, which is, it could be better, but it's not nothing, right? But it's better than nothing, is the point here. So what we're looking at here is probably pretty accurate with a little variation. This is roughly representative of society's views on these people, of the U.S.'s views on them. Now, you'll see some outliers here. You got a little dot way up there in the corner, and you got a dot way down here, right? Including those variants is important in its own right. According to the math, you want to kind of include the variants too. Oh yeah, another thing, they exclude bad pollsters, ones that are consistently wrong, and they usually go with A, B, or C rated pollsters. People like Gallup or Pew or whatever are good. Rasmussen is not good. Rasmussen is like a right-leaning pollster that very obviously has a bias. So, anyways, just looking at this, the polls are roughly telling us that Trump is at about 51% in the Republican primary. DeSantis appears to be at 21%, and Ramaswamy is at 5.5%. At this moment. He is no longer in third place, which is so actually at the time that this was recorded, when he said this, he was not in third place. Pence was in third place at 6.8%. He's at 5.6. So it goes Trump in first, DeSantis in second, Pence in third, Ramaswamy in fourth. And then we've got Nikki Haley, Scott, I don't know who Scott is, Chris Christie, Hutchinson, Burgum, and Suarez in that order. Suarez polling at 0, Burgum polling at 0.3. So anyway, that's roughly what we're looking at right now. Again, poll aggregates like this, like the bean counter thing, they're usually pretty accurate, within 3%. So if the polls are saying Ramaswamy is at about 5.5%, he's probably at about 5.5%. That's probably pretty accurate. And the fact that he's like not even accurate in saying that he's in third place, he was in fourth. The fact that he's pretending to even have a shot at this is just embarrassing, man.
But that's not the way I want to win, right? This country is founded on the people. We, the people, get to decide who governs. At least that was the way it was supposed to work. And so if the federal administrative police state is going to eliminate Donald Trump,
federal administrative police state are going to eliminate Trump. Interesting. Okay. Let him cook. Let him cook. He's got more to say. I mean, it's patently absurd, but okay, go on.
That sets a dangerous precedent in this country.
Yeah, I mean, it would if it were true, but it's complete fantasy.
I'm also someone who, even though I'm running against Trump, I truly believe he was an excellent president and he did an outstanding job in his 4 years in office. I'm running because I want to build on that foundation and take our America First movement to the next level.
Okay, that little shout there to America First. I talked about this on my my Fireside channel not too long ago. America First was a movement created by Charles Lindbergh in the 1940s to help Hitler win World War II. That was the goal of it. And, you know, all the anti-Semitism came along with it, too. Said that the Jews control Hollywood and, you know, all the other garbage that came with it. So when he shouts out to America First, he is shouting out to a history of literal Nazis. Like, I'm talking like actual full-blown, I don't mean like, oh, well, you know, these guys got questionable views. No, I mean they're actual Nazis, these people that he's talking about right now.
And I think it's just a hard fact. It's an unfortunate fact. But perhaps you'll agree with me, it is a fact that about 30% of this country just experiences instant psychiatric illness whenever he's speaking and even saying the right thing. And many of those people, what I found is
instant psychiatric illness. So he's saying Trump derangement syndrome in not so many words. That's incorrect. I'm just disgusted by the fact that Trump uses dog whistles constantly. And this guy uses them too, constantly, obviously. I pointed him out like 1,000 times so far.
Is that even if they would have otherwise agreed with him, because he's the one saying it, they will...
Completely inaccurate. If Trump said something positive, I would give him credit for that. For example, when Trump first started dealing with the pandemic, originally, first came out of the woodwork and said, okay, we got to start taking this seriously, I gave him credit for that. I will give Trump credit if he does something right. It's just literally every time the guy talks, it is always an effort to dog whistle to literal Nazis. Well, nearly every time, not every single time. When he's dog whistling to Nazis, I'm going to have a problem with that, of course. Did you expect otherwise?
Rapidly adopt the opposite viewpoint. It is sad. It is a psychiatric condition for about a third of this country. But for whatever reason, and I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, I'm saying many of the same things that Trump is saying. In many ways, I'm going further than Trump did, even with that America First agenda. I think we got to put the military on the southern border, not just the wall. I think we have to shut down the U.S. Department of Education, not just put Betsy DeVos in charge of it.
That is psychotic. The things that he's listing here are absolutely psychotic.
I've said that I would end race-based affirmative action. I pushed Trump's people on why they didn't do it, and I understand why. They said it was a political hill they didn't want to die on. I'm not constrained by that. It helps to be younger. It helps to maybe have non-white skin. I'm just going to be honest in terms of maybe providing added latitude, but I'm going...
Oh, interesting. So he's saying that he's using his skin color to, you know, manipulate people or change people's minds on things or whatever. Is that what he's saying? I feel like that's what he's implying here.
Further than Trump did. And yet, I'm not having that same deranging effect on people.
Well, when you say deranging things, you do have that effect on people. And I'm sorry, when you say deranging things, and here's the key point, and people hear it. Because at this moment, it seems like no one's really paying attention to the dude. If people paid attention to him, then they would probably be just as disgusted by the things that he said as they are at the things that Trump said.
So that's why I'm in this race. And I hope, and I'm going to be honest with you, I expect to be our next president. But I will rely on people like Donald Trump for
Okay, that's ridiculous.
advice and guidance on how we shut down that administrative state, how we build on that foundation to go even further as a country. And I think it's important to remember, Maga doesn't belong to Trump and it doesn't belong to me.
Did he say Maga? Maga? I thought it was MAGA. Have I been saying it wrong this entire time?
It's true.
It belongs to we the people of this country. And I think that's the spirit that all of us have to embrace this with.
Well,
Kitty Mom says, does he not understand that a significant part of the Maga crowd doesn't want him in this country because of his ethnic background? No, he doesn't understand. That's a really good point. I appreciate you pointing that out. The dude lives in a fantasy land where he thinks he has a chance. You know, his poll numbers may be as low as they are, at least in part because of his ethnic background. That's very possible. Again, white supremacy. That's what it's all about, baby. Now, these white supremacists will like you, I guess, if you repeat their talking points the way that, say, Jesse Lee Peterson does, for example.
I used to think that when they used that word, white supremacy, it was a negative word. But now I realize what they're thinking is that, and it's true, by the way, that white men are smarter than them, superior to them. And instead of learning, oh, hey, how did you become so superior? They want to destroy it so that they won't be reminded how dumb they are. And so they're dumbing everybody and everything down rather than coming up to the level of white supremacy.
This is a perfect illustration right here. A perfect example of what I'm talking about. If you're willing to repeat the things that they want you to repeat, whether you're black or white or Indian or whatever, they'll take it. They won't respect you, but they'll use you cynically. That's what we're seeing with Vivek Ramaswamy at this immediate moment. We are watching him be used by the people around him. And I guess he's happy with that, apparently.
Well, every presidential candidate, I asked President Trump this not long ago, what is it that you would do on the very first day of your presidency if you were elected?
Let me tell you what he would do before he does. This is how he's going to answer that question. He wants to be Trump's vice president or in Trump's cabinet in some way. So he knows that Trump represents the far right, and he's going to say the most psychotic far right thing he can possibly say. That's what he's going to do, or that's what he's going to say about the first thing he's going to do in office. It's going to be something really far right and psychotic. He's not pandering to the center of the road. He's not pandering to centrists or people who are not extremists. He wants people to think he's absolutely unglued from reality. And for the record, so does Ron DeSantis. Trump and DeSantis just don't get along with each other, apparently, which, again, is good because they might win against Biden if they ran as VP and president together.
There's actually a lot I would do on that day. I would take a pen and cross out all of the rancid executive orders that have been passed, dating many from Lyndon Johnson to Joe Biden to Barack Obama, many of which...
Okay, a lot of... another dog whistle, by the way. Lyndon B. Johnson is hated by the far right because he passed the Civil Rights Act. Because he made black people legally equal to white people, because he ended segregation, or attempted to, basically. That's why he's so hated by the far right. And like, what other reason is there to hate the guy? Honestly, he wasn't like a good president. He wasn't a bad president. He was just kind of a middle of the road president who made black people more equal. That's it. What other reason could you possibly have for hating the guy? Honestly. It's just wild. It's like not even veiled racism. It's I guess you could say it's thinly veiled. It's just barely covered racism when they talk about this. And what reasons do they have for hating Lyndon B. Johnson? Well, when asked, they'll tell you he was just a terrible president. He sucked. They hated him. He wasn't very good. You know, they'll make up all the same reason that they hated FDR. Same reasons that they hated all of the people to the left of hunting the homeless for sport. Because they did something that was just barely, like, middle of the road, tried to improve things for people, make people more equal. And the KKK doesn't like being made more equal because when all you know is privilege, equality feels like oppression. When people on the far right are put on an equal playing field with others, they believe that they are now being oppressed. He got the U.S. into Vietnam, didn't he? Did he? Lyndon B. Johnson? I know it was going on before Nixon, but Nixon was most famous for it because I think he started the draft, right? Who? Okay, now I need to know who got the U.S. into who. Yeah, it was Lyndon B. Johnson, apparently. Okay, there you go. Well, there's one reason that I don't like Lyndon B. Johnson. Is that the reason that they cite for hating him? Of course it's not. They never talk about that. There was never a war they didn't like. If it's convenient to them, if they can build a culture war off of it and get people to agree with them, then they'll go after the Vietnam War, sure. Or the draft or whatever. But not very often because they really want the military to like them, basically. They'll do whatever it takes to get the military to like them. And that means supporting anything the military does at any point ever.
On that day, I would take a pen and cross out all of the rancid executive orders that have been passed, dating many from Lyndon Johnson to Joe Biden to Barack Obama, many of which are still good law. Affirmative action in government contractors.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? If you remember, I don't know which part you were watching right now. I may or may not have played this. 1982, November 4th, 1982 interview with a KKK Grand Wizard went very similarly to what Vivek Ramaswamy is saying right now.
We feel that affirmative action is discriminating against white people, and there is no question about it. Two wrongs don't make a right. Because black people were hurt and discriminated against in the past does not justify the discrimination against white people now.
No, obviously that's true. Obviously, discrimination of any kind is not acceptable. That's not okay. That's not what affirmative action was. Like I said, when all you know is privilege, equality feels like oppression. What we're sitting here listening to is a member of the Ku Klux Klan. In fact, the leader of the KKK. We're listening to him come up with propagandistic excuses for hating equality in 1982. And now what we're listening to in Vivek Ramaswamy is a Republican candidate for president repeating the reasons that the KKK leader gave in 1982 for hating affirmative action. That's what we're listening to right now, for real. I mean, I don't know how else to interpret this.
Many of which are still good law. Affirmative action in government contractors.
How does he justify this? Seriously. We're literally listening to him repeat things that the Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard said. How does he justify this?
Is one of them. I would also make sure that most of the federal regulations that are unconstitutional are also rescinded on day one. I would set into motion a plan to shut down the Department of Education, the FBI, the ATF, and countless other government agencies that should not exist.
Okay, that's absolutely absurd. You know why he doesn't like the FBI? Because they deal with terrorism in the United States, and a lot of Trump supporters are terrorists. So naturally, they want the FBI gone because they don't like the fact that they come after terrorists. Well, trust me, if you got rid of the FBI, there are other terrorists out there other than Trump supporters or MAGA candidates or MAGA people or whatever. There are other terrorists out there. Trust me. If you shut the FBI down, you would find that out pretty quickly. Now, some of the FBI's tactics are questionable at best. Just look at the Dixon 5 story if you want to know more about that. It's a group of Muslims who famously back in the, right after 9/11, were targeted by the FBI. And the FBI basically attempted to get them to commit some terrorist attack because they believe that they're Muslims, so they must be terrorists. That kind of thinking is what they were using at the time. And the FBI ended up arresting them, all 5 of them, after causing this thing that they were trying to catch them doing. The FBI famously arrested them and put them in ADX Florence Supermax, which it was a completely unjust situation. The Dixon 5. Deeply, deeply wrong what happened to these people. The FBI has a long history of doing that. But you know what else the FBI has a long history of doing? Catching psychotic nutcases. That's another thing. So I feel it's blatantly obvious that the FBI is valuable and should continue to exist in its current form. Maybe reform so that they have more regulation about entrapping people and pushing them into taking terrorist action, because I don't think that that's helpful. Getting people to do these terrorist acts. Like, we're trying to stop this stuff. The FBI has a history, especially with the Dixon 5. It's a perfect example of encouraging people to do these psychotic things, like pushing them into it, asking them to go buy an illegal weapon for them, and when they go buy this illegal weapon for them, arresting them for buying illegal weapons, that kind of thing. Questionable behaviors. But they catch terrorists, so yeah, we definitely need the FBI, absolutely.
The other thing that I've said I would do is, and this is one of the threats to religious liberty in this country, by the way, the government is pressuring private actors, banks, social media companies, internet companies, to do through the back door what government could not do through the front door under the Constitution.
This is actually an interesting argument that calls out not just to the right, but also to the left in some cases. I don't think this isn't happening. This is fabricated nonsense. You don't have a right to a platform. But it's kind of complaining that Twitter blocks people or bans people or whatever. That's what this is. They're completely ignoring the fact that Donald Trump specifically asked Twitter to remove a tweet because he didn't like it. As the president of the United States, the White House requested it. That's not good at all. That's bad. But they ignore that fact in favor of the fact that Hunter Biden had duck pictures of waterfowl on his laptop that Joe Biden, the Biden campaign, asked Twitter to remove because it was a violation of their terms of service. That's a completely different situation. They're not the same at all. So what he's complaining about is a fabrication for the right, but it's something that Trump actually did do. Is he pointing that out? Is he talking about the fact that Trump did it? No, of course not.
And so what I would say is anytime a government official in the last 5 years has pressured a private actor to do something unconstitutional, we will require that on pain of criminal penalties, they actually publish it. I've also focused on...
Okay, interesting. I think I could agree with that. Let me try. I'm trying to get this straight. What was his policy prescription? Hang on, let me just listen again.
And so what I would say is anytime a government official in the last 5 years has pressured a private actor to do something unconstitutional, we will require that on pain of criminal penalties, they actually publish it.
Okay, so right there is your evidence that he doesn't really give a shit about this issue. Why are you saying, they have to publish anything in the past 5 years? Why aren't we looking forward? Why are you looking back? I don't give a shit what happened in the past. Well, I do. But you know what? If we can't fix what happened in the past, then I really don't care about it. Let's move forward and fix things. If you wanted to, on pain of persecution, force the government or force these social media companies to publish anything that the government asks them to do that's illegal, moving forward, I'm all for it. Absolutely, yes. Why are we looking backwards at this? Because it's a culture war issue. That's why. They never gave a shit about this stuff. They never cared about what the government did or didn't do or any of that. They cared about culture war nonsense and catching, their political enemies in some nonsense. That's what it's really all about.
I've also focused on exactly making sure that we're growing our economy Let's start with the U.S. energy sector. Lift those regulations that stop us from drilling, fracking, burning coal, embracing nuclear energy.
Wait a minute. So is he saying he wants to embrace nuclear energy, or that it would be a bad thing to embrace nuclear energy? I can't really tell what he's saying here. Why do you want to increase fracking and stuff? That doesn't make any sense at all. We don't need to do that. We can increase wind farms and create like a phenomenally good situation for ourselves. You know that we have to buy, I don't know, something like 5 million barrels of oil from somebody else, from some other country right now, to make up for our shortfalls. We can only pull somewhere around 16 million barrels of oil out of the ground per year. I don't remember what the figures are. It's 16 to 19, I believe, is the ratio. I think it's like 16 million barrels per year come out of the ground in the U.S. We have to make up that shortfall by buying it from Russia or somebody, anybody, right? Why don't you invest in solar farms? Seriously. Or not just solar farms. Why don't we invest in wind farms? That's energy independence. All you talk about, right? Energy independence. Let's get energy independence. Real energy independence. And for the record, nuclear energy would help with that. I'm not a fan of nuclear energy, but you know what? It's necessary. We're going to have to use nuclear energy as a shortfall, or I'm sorry, as a backstop while we're trying to transition to all renewable energy. Why are you trying to go to non-renewable energy? What? That doesn't make any sense. Because it's a culture war issue. That's it. There is no other reason. Yeah, nuclear energy, I see people complaining about this a little bit. Nuclear energy is not the perfect solution. It's not fantastic. There is more pollution that comes along with it and all that stuff. But it, in my opinion, I believe that we're going to need nuclear energy to help us transition to an all renewable system. We just have no other choice because we're in a rush right now. We have to get this done now. We have to go as renewable as possible immediately. And nuclear energy does not emit, to my knowledge, any carbon into the atmosphere. At the very least, not anywhere near as much carbon as, burning coal does to power stuff, for example, or oil or whatever. So anyway, nuclear power is important right now, while we work on transitioning to wind farms, solar, and all that. This number may be outdated now. I don't know. You're going to want to look it up. But the last I heard, it was accurate at one point recently. Last I heard, do you know how much it would cost to transition the entire world over to completely renewable energy? The whole world, not the U.S., the world. You know how much it would cost? $30 trillion. You know how long it would take to recover that money? Because right now we're spending like tons of money in, correcting pollution problems that directly arose from coal power plants and oil power plants, the problems that come along with fossil fuels, basically. And we're also like paying for power, and we're also paying for power sources that we don't need to pay for. We can just set up a wind farm and dramatically reduce the amount that we're spending on this stuff. It would take 10 years to recover that $30 trillion in saved money for the world. I'm not talking for the U.S. I mean the world. 30 trillion, and it'd come back to us in 10 years. Transition 100% to renewable energy. Why the fuck aren't we doing that right now? Seriously. Why has the government not just done that? Like, I'm just baffled by this culture war issue. You could make the U.S. stronger dramatically, immediately, by transitioning over to an energy source that would save us massive amounts of money and make us energy independent instantly. And we'd have 16 million barrels of oil per year to sell Because we suddenly don't need that anymore, right? Because we're fully energy independent. We're fully renewable. What the hell are you doing, you idiots? Seriously, think about this. Think about how stupid it is that these people are holding the positions that they hold, are doing the things they're doing, are screaming about, you know, solar farms and all of this, when it could, like, you have no idea. Well, apparently Vivek Ramaswamy has no idea how much good would come from building out solar farms in the U.S., going fully renewable. What the hell are you doing, you idiots? Honestly.
Let's start with the U.S. energy sector. Lift those regulations that stop us from drilling, fracking, burning coal, embracing nuclear energy. And all of that, I promise you, is just on day one. The other thing I've said on day one.
Yeah, I don't know if he's encouraging embracing nuclear energy or not. Again, I'm in favor of embracing nuclear energy. So,
one is we're going to pardon anyone who was the victim of a politically motivated persecution through prosecution.
Okay, that hasn't happened. That would be fantastic if you pardoned people who were victim of that, but that's just fabricated nonsense. That's not a problem in the United States. So, yeah, that would be bad. What he's really saying here is he wants to pardon all of the January 6th people. That is just unglued from reality.
From Julian Assange to Douglas Mackey.
Ooh, Julian Assange, that's an interesting one. In my opinion, I don't think that we should be pardoning Julian Assange, truthfully. It's complicated. It's a complicated issue. In my opinion, he was a puppet of the Russian government, and he knew that he was a puppet of the Russian government, and he was willingly doing that. My thoughts on this are very complex and nuanced, and I don't have time to get into it, but I don't think Julian Assange should be pardoned.
To yes, up to and including, God forbid, Donald Trump himself, I will see through that we actually have one system of justice in this country.
No, that's what we're showing by charging some of these people with crimes, including Trump. That there is one system of justice, and Trump is trying to break it into two by getting pardoned or by getting forgiven or whatever. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, there's nothing that he's going to be able to do about the fact that he's been charged with state crimes. The president cannot pardon state crimes. He was charged in New York State, and he was charged, or no. He's about to be charged somewhere, isn't he? Where is he going to be charged soon? Georgia? I think he's going to be charged in Georgia, or there's speculation that he might, or something to that effect. There's no fixing that by the president. Like, you can't fix that. I'm sorry. He's just going to have to face the music in those cases, and that's just what it is.
Instead of two tiers of justice, which unfortunately is what we have today.
No, it's not.
Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you, sir, for coming by Flashpoint. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy man.
I hope we can chat more, and I've enjoyed this.
Absolutely.
So, thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right. So, Rick, as we start to look at all of this, I want to...
God, dude, these people are psychotic. Seriously. Oh, my God. How do you get to this point in your life where you are so unglued from reality like this, you know? This is just insane. These people are insane.
He had to go, but I wanted to kind of roll in. Let's roll that clip from Tucker's interview with him about January 6th. Yeah.
It's pretty scary. So let's just go through it.
I'm sorry. One quick note before we listen to this. Somebody says Trump is going to be charged in Washington by Jack Smith again. Jack Smith is not charging Donald Trump on Washington, D.C. crimes. I believe he's charging him on federal crimes, right? And he can be pardoned by the president for whatever Jack Smith charges him with, I believe. It's possible to be pardoned. I could be wrong on that. Someone fact check me. I'm not sure what the jurisdiction is with Jack Smith, but I believe it's federal because it's being pushed through by the U.S. Attorney General. It's the U.S. Attorney General charging him, Merrick Garland, ultimately. Or he was appointed by Merrick Garland. So yeah, it's federal. It's not Washington's. It's not Washington D.C. That means he could be pardoned by a president for that. But yeah, like I said, he has to face the music for state charges. I mean, unless he was pardoned by state governors, he could be pardoned by governors. That's possible. Like New York State is going to be a challenge for him because it's a very left-wing state, and Hochul is the governor right now, which she's very right-wing, unfortunately, but I don't think she's right-wing enough to... I mean, she's technically registered as a Democrat, but I think she's more right-wing than she is left-wing. You can't run as a Republican in New York State or New York City or anywhere else and win. So everybody runs as a Democrat, whether they're a Republican or not. For example, the mayor of New York City is very obviously a Republican. It's clear as day. He ran as a Democrat because he knew he couldn't win otherwise, but he's a Republican. Talking Eric Adams. He was a police chief. He believes that there should be more God in government. He says that he was hoping for Lee Zeldin, the Republican, to win the governor race in New York because he'd love to work with Lee Zeldin instead of the Democrat. I mean, Eric Adams is obviously a Republican. He just ran as a Democrat. So anyways, Hochul is also very Republican-esque. But I don't think she's Republican enough to pardon Trump for his state crimes. So I guess time will tell. Let's keep listening to these fools.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right. So, Rick, as we start to look at all of this, I want to, he had to go, but I wanted to kind of roll in. Let's roll that clip from Tucker's interview with him on.
If you're just coming into this, they did an interview with Vivek Ramaswamy. That's what they're talking about. And they're hyping him up like mad because they want him to be basically in the Trump administration to some degree, it seems like.
Kind of roll in. Let's roll that clip from Tucker's interview with him on about January 6th.
Yeah. It's pretty scary. So let's just go through the list. Another thing you can't say is that maybe January 6th, while appalling on one level, maybe it was not an insurrection.
No, it was an insurrection. I feel like I went through this on another video recently, but just in case people are unaware or unfamiliar with the story or whatever, Stewart Rhodes, the leader of the, not the 3%. What the hell is Stewart Rhodes the leader of? Oath Keepers, that's what it was. Stewart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers, and I believe the 3%ers was involved in this too, and also the Proud Boys were involved in this. They were meeting with Roger Stone in a parking garage, famously. They met with members of Trump's posse, for lack of a better term, and planned out exactly how they were going to create chaos and get into the Capitol on January 6th and reach senators and House members and stuff. They planned this. And Stewart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers, was staying back as a battlefield general and had placed weapons caches around the city, like outside of the Capitol, so that if it came to it or when it came to it, his plan was to send armed men into the Capitol once they finally got in and reached whatever. They had caches of weapons there. That was an insurrection. This is all established information, okay? I don't know how else to tell you this. It was an insurrection. It was a coup attempt.
So let me talk about. I haven't talked about this much in the campaign.
Please talk about it.
I'll be very honest with you.
Fantastic.
You want to know what caused January 6th?
Oh, I know what caused it. Donald Trump planning a coup with the leaders of national organizations, the Oath Keepers, the 3%ers, the Proud Boys, people like that, and planning out with them exactly how he was going to capture senators and House members and force a hostage situation. Yeah. I know how this happened. I know exactly how it happened because I paid close attention.
Such a temptation to say that there's one man whose name is unspeakable. We can't.
No, first of all, it's QAnon. It's QAnon.
It's QAnon.
No, it was Trump that planned all of this, and Stuart Rhodes and Enrique Tarrio and a couple of other people who were acting as battlefield generals. They weren't actually in the city when some of this happened, or maybe they were just inside the city when it happened. But yeah, all these people planned this stuff out.
You want to know what caused January 6th? Is pervasive censorship in this country in the lead up to January 6th.
No, I think it was Stuart Rhodes planning like a battlefield general and placing weapons caches around the city.
You tell people in this country they cannot speak, that is when they scream. You tell people they cannot scream, that is when they tear things down. And so the reality is...
That's interesting. So you're telling me so what you're telling me is riots are the language of the unheard. Does that sound familiar? That's a Martin Luther King quote. Now, MLK Jr. it's a Martin Luther King Jr. quote. MLK Jr. was peaceful. He believed in peaceful protest, and he accomplished his goals, and he did it flawlessly. He was incredible. But he wanted to make clear that riots were happening as a direct result of what the Ku Klux Klan was doing. The things that they were doing to ignore the demands of the black community, basically. What are the complaints or demands of Trump supporters? Let me tell you exactly how this played out and why it played. All right. Let me tell you exactly why this played out the way that it did, January 6th. When all you know is privilege, equality feels like oppression. Trump supporters feel like they are being oppressed because they're being made more equal to everybody else, or more accurately, everyone else is being made more equal to them, and they don't seem to like that very much. So they lose their shit, and they riot. That's what happened on January 6th. These people are living in a fantasy land where they believe that they're being oppressed. They're not. Never were.
We were told that you could not question.
I'm sorry, but notice what he did there. He quoted Martin Luther King Jr. and just modified the quote just the slightest bit to make it sound different, but mean the exact same thing. So he's comparing the January 6th people to the black community in the 1960s when they were being oppressed at that time.
To January 6th. You tell people in this country they cannot speak, that is when they scream. You tell people they cannot scream, that is when they tear things down. And so the reality is, we were told that you could not question where the virus came from when we all knew it came from a lab in Wuhan, which now they admit.
No, nobody admits that. That's not factual. And I don't care if you think you knew that at the time, you didn't. You didn't have the evidence to back that claim up all the way back then, in 2021 or whatever, 2020, when conspiracy theorists were floating that idea. You know what? If it started in a lab in Wuhan, fine. I'll accept that. That's fine. I understand. Okay. Now let's figure out how to prevent that from happening again in the future is my concern. Right? But there's no evidence for that. None. Zero. The Department of Energy put out a speculative report that basically said, we think maybe, with low confidence, we think maybe it started in a lab in Wuhan. The Department of Energy, which, by the way, the confidence level being low was the same confidence level that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. It was the same confidence level used to justify the Iraq war. I'm not joking. So, once again, we have here somebody justifying or creating the pretext to justify atrocities based off of flimsy evidence or no evidence at all. Now, back in 2020, when conspiracy theorists were claiming it came from a lab in Wuhan, they did not have the evidence to claim that at the time. You know why? Because they don't have the evidence to claim it now. When you say something without having evidence to say it, that thing you said is false. Whether it turned out to be true or not, it's false. because you didn't know for sure. You had no idea if what you were saying was true. I got to stop every 3 seconds because I can't let him get away with anything.
You could not question where the virus came from when we all knew it came from a lab in Wuhan, which now they admit. We were
Nobody admits that.
told that you could not send a private message to someone on the eve of an election that Hunter Biden's laptop story was actually a true story worth considering.
I'm sorry, what? Who said you're not allowed to send private messages to people? What are you talking about? Nobody ever said any of this stuff. He's just pretending to be a victim here when he's simply not. When Trump supporters are not victims, okay? At no point have Trump supporters been victimized by anything.
Before an election, you were systematically suppressed. So think about this. You told you had to be locked down, had to take a vaccine that was...
Well, that's actually kind of it. He says you were systematically suppressed. Isn't that interesting? It's an interesting phrase. Sounds really similar to systemic oppression, doesn't it? Almost identical. Almost like he's claiming that he's the real victim rather than other people.
Biden's laptop story was actually a true story worth considering before an election. You were systematic.
Okay, I just want to point out I have serious, deep doubts about the Hunter Biden laptop story. And also, I don't give a shit what Hunter Biden did, honestly. I really don't. He could have, done it like he could have murdered somebody and I don't care. Send him to jail if he did something wrong. Again, I have doubts about the idea that that's even his real laptop. I have no clue. But just want to put that on record.
Suppressed. So think about this. You told you had to be locked down, had to take a vaccine that was mandated and forced down your throat.
It was not mandated at any point. Vaccine was never mandated in the United States by anybody under any conditions ever. There was a testing mandate. You had to get tested every how long was it? Once a week, maybe? You had to get tested every week. I mean, this was shot down anyway, so this this was tried to be pushed through by Biden, but it was shot down anyways by the Supreme Court. Tested once a week, and you could be exempted from the testing mandate by getting a vaccine. Some companies, like Fox News, mandated testing every day if you refused a vaccine. There was never, at any point, a vaccine mandate. Nobody was fired from their job for not getting vaccinated. Didn't happen. You live in a fantasy if you think so.
Stay locked down in your home while Antifa and BLM roam and burn the streets of this country. So that's the lead up of 1 full year of telling people you have to shut up, sit down, and do as you're told.
God, it's all nonsense culture war issues. That's it. There's nothing in this dude's head but culture war bullshit.
And then you tell them, okay, there's an election where you didn't get the information that you needed, such as the Hunter Biden laptop story being real and suppressed. That's what caused January 6th.
No, it's just nonsense. He's making himself out to be a victim, and Trump supporters, and they love hearing about how victimized they are.
Cycle of censorship in this country. And until we look ourselves in the mirror and admit truth on that, we will not move forward as a country.
All right, Rick, you heard him talk about censorship in America is what caused all this. Do you agree with that?
No. I mean, he's going to say yes, but no. It's funny how these people, just go around to each other and ask, do you agree with that? When the answer is very obviously going to be yes, of course they agree with that. Everybody on this program agrees with what they show, yes.
I don't think he said anything tonight or in that interview that I disagree with. I don't think it's the only cause, but I think it clearly was a major pressure and motivator. And, Gene, I got to tell you something, man. I don't usually reveal family conversations, but last night, sitting around with the family, one of my sons absolutely, after watching that interview with Tucker, said he's a Vivek voter, man. He's already with him all the way. So, first of all, Tucker did a fantastic job interviewing those guys.
I can't believe that they're not saying that they're Trump voters. Are they not Trump voters?
All the way. So, first of all, Tucker did a fantastic job interviewing those guys back to back. But I'm telling you, and that's my son that said this is 20 years old. So it's that demographic that you were talking about earlier and asking about. I love the fact that he speaks to them, that he draws out in them a love of our country. His ability as a first-generation American.
It's so interesting to me that they seem to believe that they're instilling a love of the country in people. No, they're actually instilling a visceral disdain for the United States with the things that they say, like Vivek Ramaswamy, for example, the things that Vivek says. They are building in an absolute hatred for, you know, what they believe is happening in the U.S. that's not happening. It's just like Fantasyland shit, man. I'm telling you, it's crazy.
American to articulate that and to talk about the value of the free enterprise system and our constitutional rights, our due process, all of those things. It's really special, man, and I'm glad to see him in the race. I think it's good for America.
Good for America. All right, Pastor Hank, I want to give you a comment before we go to the break.
Yeah. Yes, I was hoping that you're going to come to me. And I want to be just what I always do. I want to just say it. I appreciate people coming on and giving their viewpoints. I appreciate this gentleman's conviction to run. I appreciate he seems to be on point with what really sounds to me like I'm listening to President Trump.
Yeah, Hank Kunneman cannot endorse Vivek Ramaswamy because he's already literally prophesied about Donald Trump. Like he believes that he's the Messiah. So he can't endorse him. He has to endorse Trump.
That's exactly what President Trump stands for, what this gentleman is standing for. But here's the problem I have. You just talked about censorship. Well, the same censorship messed with the 2020 election integrity.
Oh, give me a break, dude. No, it didn't. No, it did not. There was no censorship that interfered with the 2020 election. This dude cannot give it up, can he? We are almost 4 years out, okay? Move on with your life, Hank. Move on with your life. He can't. You know why he can't move on from the 2020 election? Because he claimed that God told him that Trump would win it. That's why. And if he moves on, it means he's a false prophet. And he cannot stomach that possibility.
And this is why anyone, in my opinion, that is running on the primary against President Trump is not going back and looking at 2020 and saying that it matters. Second, they're not saying America first, because President Trump...
Again, I talked about this before. America first is a thinly veiled dog whistle. It's not even thinly veiled. It's just like a foghorn screaming out to the Nazi Party. Or the America First movement in the United States was originally created in the 1940s to prevent the United States from entering World War II so that Hitler had a better chance of winning it. That was the reason it was started. That was the goal behind the movement. America first. We're isolationists. We don't need to get involved in World War II. Ignore it. Just move away. Forget it. Nobody cares what's happening to the Jews over there. They suck anyways. That was basically what he was saying. Actually, what Charles Lindbergh said when founding the America First movement, what he actually said about the Jews is, I don't like what's happening to the Jews right now in Germany, but we need to think about America first. And I can tell you this, this is paraphrased. It's something like, I can tell you this, the Jews control Hollywood in America, and they control, all this, blah, 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 whatever. They control everything in this guy's mind. That's basically what he said. Said, yeah, I don't like what Hitler's doing to him, but they do control the media in the United States, so yeah. That was the whole thing. And once the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, that was it for the America First movement. Like, they couldn't, prevent America from getting involved anymore in World War II. It was going to happen after the Pearl Harbor bombing. So, that's the history of the America First Party that Hank Kunneman here is talking about. I'm sorry, not the America First Party, but the America First movement. That's the history of it. So anytime you hear them talk about America First, it's not even really like a dog whistle. It's a full-blown shout-out to Nazism, really.
2020 and saying that it matters. Second, they're not saying America first. because President Trump clearly won. 81 million plus voted for him.
No, he didn't. Biden won 81 million votes. Trump won 73 million, 74 million. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was somewhere in that vicinity. They just live in a fantasy land 24/7, dude.
And those 81 million never got their vote considered and never got their voice to be heard. And I think anybody that's running against President Trump is running against 81 million who...
Look, I understand some people, I get that they feel that their voice wasn't heard. But I'll tell you who can't say that their voice was not heard. And that was your mom in screaming format. And it was my name that she was screaming. So, all right, let's keep listening.
Their vote considered and never got their voice to be heard. And I think anybody that's running against President Trump is running against 81 million who have a right for their voice and their vote to be counted. And I think it needs to not only be America first, I think it needs to be President Trump first. And he needs to be counted and considered. It's the right, honorable thing to do.
Trump has never been considered. Trump is not being considered right now and wasn't considered all the way back then. We need to consider Trump. Dude lives in a fantasy land.
And so that's my position.
One thing's for sure.
Wow, so surprised by that position that he holds, right? After prophesying Trump was going to win the 2020 election and then, Trump losing. How does your wife feel about these your mom jokes? I don't think she cares. I think they're funny. I've been cracking up at them. That's what she just said. I like to make them really elaborate and specific and pointed. Like, go into a big, long explanation about something technical and then just end it with something, your mom related. I got the idea from The Office. I don't know if you guys ever seen that, but there was an episode where Stanley, curmudgeonly Stanley, came up with this whole thing where he goes into a detailed explanation of something and he ends it with, and then shove it up your butt. So I've been doing something similar with your mom. Anyways. Okay, let's keep listening. Just in case I missed it before, I wanted to say it again. It's obvious that's his position. It's obvious why. The reason that's his position is because he prophesied it. Word from God, directly. Like, God gave him this information from on high, and like writing a new book of the Bible. The book of Kuhneman, verse 3, chapter 2. Seriously, that's what we're talking about right now. And if Trump didn't win the 2020 election, he's a false prophet. You know what they prescribe for false prophets. I mean, I'm not endorsing that. I'm just saying Hank has to face that fact down if Trump didn't win, which he very obviously did not. That's why Kuhneman keeps talking about this stuff.
And as we go to break, there's no doubt, no matter what they've thrown at President Donald Trump, he has certainly only grown in popularity.
No, he has not. He has fallen dramatically in popularity, but okay.
Do you have those stats, Jason, for that poll? That the same ActCon, the poll there, I think he came out.
Oh, they're going to find a single poll that, backs up the things that they believe, and they're going to spread it around and pretend that this is the only accurate one, and every other poll is completely inaccurate. Now, I described this concept, this mathematical concept earlier, but the idea is, let me just explain it again because I don't know which part it was in. The idea is that if you're at a carnival and you're standing around a big jar of beans and you got a bean counter guy here, and he says, if you guess how many beans are in this giant thing of beans here, then I will give you $50,000. So here's the mathematical concept. If you go around to every person, say there are like 20 people gathered around the beans, and you get all of their guesses, and you average those guesses out, you'll get pretty close to an accurate number. Won't be perfect, but it'll be very, very close. That's the idea behind polling averages and what's called aggregates, like aggregate websites such as 538.com. That's the aggregate website I use because they only aggregate pollsters that are ranked A, B, or C. basically, that are very highly ranked and have consistently gotten things correct the majority of the time. So these Trump supporters, let me just show you real quick what, yeah, it's still pulled up here. This is the primary poll aggregate. If you look closely here, you'll see in the top left corner, right next to the M in March on the top, where it's moving here, you'll see there's a little blue dot. That blue dot says Trump is polling at about 80% in the primary, but it's an outlier. Now, these aggregates include those outliers because just like when you're counting beans at the carnival, you need to include the outliers, the really high and the really lows, because that mathematically helps average it out to a more accurate number. That's why they include that in the aggregates. So what these guys are doing right now, I haven't even seen the poll they're about to present, but I guarantee you just about what they're going to do is they're going to pick one of those outliers that's really, really high, and they're going to say, look at this poll. This shows that Trump is loved, Biden is hated, and everything is perfect in our world, and the 2020 election was stolen, and blah, 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 all that other garbage. So let's hear what they say here.
That poll, that the same ActCon, the poll there, I think he came out with 86% of the vote among the same age group. With that, the millennials, everything, he still came out leading in that.
86%. 86%. They think that Trump got 86% in a Republican primary poll. Now, it was a straw poll, which means they went to a TPUSA conference and they polled everybody in the room. And for that matter, who did the polling? What was their methodology? How did they calculate this stuff? Did they take a proper sample size? Did they take a sample from, all likely voters, or did they take a sample from, only a couple of demographics? Like, what was the voting methodology behind this? There was none. It was a straw poll. Straw polls are okay, but you have to point out that they're not an accurate representation of anything at all. But these people, they wouldn't even include a straw poll in these aggregates that I was talking about because they're not even close to accurate. But these guys will do anything to imply that Donald Trump is the most loved person in the entire party. So they pick this straw poll that says that Trump got 86%, which, by the way, is even higher than this outlier in this official aggregate. Way, way higher. 86%? This one is 79%. This ridiculously high outlier. But, facts don't matter to these people. Anything that they can tell people to convince them that Trump is more loved works to their benefit. More loved than he actually is. Because if they can convince people Trump is more loved than he actually is, then it doesn't make any sense for him to have lost a 2020 election. It doesn't make any sense for him to lose a primary or any of the other stuff. They live in a fantasy land 24/7, and they use flawed data to back that up. This is a propaganda method that they're using right now.
So it is an amazing thing, and they call him Teflon Don, but I think there's
Well, they call him Teflon Don because they're comparing him to a mobster named, what the hell was that mobster's name? John Gotti was the original mobster that was Teflon, and he was the Don of the mafia. That was his title, the Don. I think they called him Don John. I don't know. Who knows? Anyways, he was Teflon because he got away with everything. They couldn't stick anything to him. He was he's slippery. He found a way out of all of it. He bribed people, or he'd threaten people, or he always had somebody else doing it. There was a story. Of course, I live in New York City, and I went on some tours here. It's a place called Ferrara's, I believe, and it's famously where one of the 5 families of the mafia used to meet with his underbosses of the mafia. And he knew that anywhere that he went could be bugged by the cops. So he famously never said a single word to anybody. He simply nodded his head yes or no while they discussed things. That way, when, anything was ever presented in court, any wiretaps, any recordings, anything at all, he was never on tape suggesting that anybody do anything at all. I don't know if that was the original Teflon Don John Gotti. I'm not sure if that's who did that or not at Ferraris. I don't remember exactly. But, just by calling Donald Trump Teflon Don, they're referring to him as a scumbag. I think that's kind of funny. Like, their own verbiage refers to him as a total piece of garbage.
Millennials, everything. He still came out leading in that. So it is an amazing thing, and they call him Teflon Don, but I think there's an anointed Don there as well. All right.
He's calling him the Messiah when he does that, by the way. I don't want that to slip by. They just called Donald Trump the Messiah.
We're going to take a break. We come back. Freedom of speech and freedom of religion. We're not done with that topic. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
These people are psychotic, dude. These people need help. No joke. Fascinating to watch their propaganda techniques, though, like that thing that they did with the polls. It's so interesting to see how they frame it up to be something that they to make it easier to convince Trump supporters that they've been taken advantage of when they simply have not. And let me know what you think about it in the comments. I'm super interested by this. By the by, next one that we watch probably won't have Breath of the Wild 2 in it because I officially got Hestu's gift. I 100%ed the Korok seeds. I've basically 100%ed the game. I didn't even do that in the original Breath of the Wild, so yeah, we'll probably hit something like Final Fantasy VII or something. I don't know yet. We'll see. Maybe Mario Maker 2 or something. I don't know. Stick around and find out. And let me know what you think about this stuff in the comments.